my side before you start. Okay, thank you very much. 1 minute. Okay, so today we have three eminent experts from the field of pharmaceutical sector in EU. The first one is Professor Paola. She is a PhD and she received her PhD in pharmaceutical technology, and currently she is working as a professor in University of Milan. She has successfully completed her administrative responsibilities as director of the School of Specialization in Hospital Pharmacy of the University of Milan. She is serving as an editorial member of several reputed international journals and of books on pharmaceutical legislations. She has authored 100 publications and is a member of Italian Commission for the elaboration of the National Pharmacopoeia and of Italian Agency of Drugs Subcommission for the marketing authorization of drugs. Her main research interests are research concerning transdermal drug delivery systems and buccal drug delivery systems. And the other expert we have with us today is Dr. Paolo Rocco, who is again a PhD and an associate professor at the University of Milan, Italy. His main skills are in medicines, biosimilars, community pharmacy, and molecular dynamics. And the third expert is Dr. Umberto, who is a PhD and a research associate at University of Milan, Italy. And his skills and expertise are mainly in formulations, pharmaceutics and pharmaceutical technology, controlled drug delivery, and targeted drug delivery. So the topic for the day, which all three of them would be taking, is regulation of the pharmaceutical sector in EU. And I hope it is going to be a stimulating lecture for you. And at the end of the lecture, we are going to take up your question and answers from the experts. Thank you very much. It's over to Professor Paola now.
Thank you, for your kind presentation. We'll be very happy to be here with you today discussing the regulation in Europe of pharmaceutical drugs. Can you go on, Stefano? Okay, next slide. Thank you. So as you can see here in the outline, you can see that we divide the field. I will start with a little introduction, then Paolo will introduce you in the institution and regulatory agency in the European Union that take care of the drug or regulation of drug. Then I will discuss with you the definition of medicinal product in comparison with medical device, and going through the manufacturing authorization in Europe. Then Professor Paolo Rocco will tell you something about the different procedures that we have in Europe. And then we go on with the intellectual property rights that are very important in the pharmaceutical field. And then what we can use as copies, that means generics and biosimilar, to finish with two other problems or aspects that are price, reimbursement, and post-marketing study. Next things. Okay, so only a disclaimer for all of us. This project has been co-financed by the European Commission, and this presentation reflects the view of the authors. Okay, next, thanks. Okay, so we are discussing with you today about medicinal products. When we discuss about that, we have to take care that we have two aspects that we have to consider. One is the protection of the public health of the citizen, of the single person, but also the public health of the society and the entire world. On the other aspect, we have to take care of the economical aspect. That means how we can permit to all the patients around the world to access the therapy. So these are two aspects of the drug, and then we have to take care of both of them. In Europe, the situation is not so easy, in consideration that the first one, that all the regulation that take care of the protection of public health, that mean quality, efficacy, and safety, are regulated at the European level. That means the Commission in the EU. On the other part, the reimbursement price and setting and type of hospital or type of pharmacy are governed by local law. So we have the same drug, but different access to therapy in the different member states. The next, thanks. So for the first aspect, that is public health protection, we will go on in this afternoon. We have different authorization. The first one is authorization of the production, and the other one is authorization to the commercialization. That is what we call MA in English. And we have to take care of the balance between benefit and risk. And only when the balance is positive, that means that, of course, when we have a drug, you have to consider that every time we have some risk, some side effect can be, but we have to consider the benefit in treating the pathology, in the health of the patient. And if this balance is positive, of course, the drug can be put on the market. Thanks. The next. The situation related to antibiotic, in consideration that in this project we take care of problem related also to antibiotics. This is very important. It's still to use the antibiotics in a very rational way. And you can see here that, for example, Italy, like Germany, are two member states of the European that produce a lot of product. One of the main producer in Europe is Italy, and the other one is Germany. And this is for all the drugs, but it is the same if we consider only the antibiotics. The problem is that probably we use too much antibiotic all around the world, but also in our countries. And in effect, for example, in Italy, we have a large amount of antibiotics that are used, and probably we have to work on that to reduce the use of this product. The next, thanks. All around the world, we are taking care, we have some concerning about the use of antibiotics. And in Europe, we have different strategies to reduce to increase the awareness and to promote the use, the correct or rational use of antibiotics. Next, thanks. Okay. Now I will give the floor to Paolo that introduce you on institutional and regulatory agencies.
Good morning to everyone. So since that we will be talking of EU legislation and guidelines, we see the main actors here, and we start with the institutions. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And we are mainly interested in who makes the law in the European Union, the lawmaking bodies on the one part, and the competent authorities for medicinal products on the others. Next slide, please. So here we have the lawmaking institution, which are the European Parliament, the European Commission, and the Council of the European Union. The role are different, as the European Commission proposes the law, and the European Parliament and the Council approves them through a procedure that is called the ordinary legislative procedure, and was once called the co-decision procedure because it is really a co-decision between the European Parliament and the Council. Next slide, please. So we introduce very briefly, just to see what they do mainly and where they are. We go to Strasbourg, and where we find the European Parliament, which is the directly elected EU body and has legislative, supervisory, and budgetary responsibilities. Next slide, please. Then we go to Brussels, where we have the Council of the European Union, which is the voice of the EU member governments. Next slide, please. And finally, the European Commission, that is always in Brussels, which is promotes the general interest of the European Union by proposing and enforcing legislation, and it is the executive arm of the European Union. Next slide, please. So we introduce EU law. We have primary legislation and secondary legislation. Primary legislation are the EU treaties, the founding treaties of the European Union, but we are in this context mainly concerned with secondary legislation, which include regulations, directives, and decisions. Next slide, please. So these are all binding. This is all binding legislation, binding legal acts. We encounter mainly regulations and directives in the medicinal products regulation, and they are different. Next slide, please. Regulations are directed directly to EU citizens, and they are applied in their entirety across the European Union. So we will meet regulation number 726 of 2004 on the centralized procedure and establishing the European Medicines Agency, which is valid throughout the European Union. On the other hand, the directive is directed to the member states. So it must be transposed by member states into a national legislation. And so it is used in cases where some harmonization of the legislation is needed with each national legislation. And in this case, the founding legal act in force for medicinal products, Directive 2001 of 83 of 2001, is a directive, and it has been transposed, for example, in Italy with the Decreto Legislativo 1219 of 2006. Next slide, please. Then there are also not binding legal acts, like recommendations and opinions, but we mainly focus on binding legal acts. Next slide, please. And before ending with EU institutions, I just wanted to introduce you to the European Court of Justice, or the Court of Justice of the European Union, which has different duties. And for our purposes, it is very important. It's duty to do the preliminary ruling. They offer the authentic interpretation of EU law when there is the case, and when a case is brought to their attention, which is not every time, of course, because it is a centralized Court of Justice. Next slide, please. So as you can see, it is located in Luxembourg, and its role is ensuring EU law is interpreted and applied the same in every European Union country, and ensuring that countries of the European Union and European Union institutions abide by EU law. Next slide, please. What are we mainly interested here? Even if we won't see much of it, it is the first point here. The role of the Court of Justice of the European Union of interpreting the law, giving the authentic interpretation of the law when it is needed, and so-called preliminary rulings. Next slide, please. Then we come to the other side, the health organization in the European Union. We have the European Commission and the European Medicines Agency. The European Medicines Agency is a scientific body. It's made of committees, and it evaluates medicinal products that are marketed through a specific procedure that we will see later, that is called the centralized procedure. On the other hand, the European Commission formally authorizes drugs after evaluation by the EMA, and it has a Directorate General Health and Food Safety, DG Santé, and apart from the marketing authorization of medicinal products, other areas of interest to the European Commission are other health areas that are apart from medicinal products, like regulation of alcohol, tobacco, illicit drugs, and so next slide, please. So the European Medicines Agency is responsible for coordinating the existing scientific resources for the evaluation, supervision, and pharmacovigilance of medicinal products. So it is a central agency, a central competent authority for medicinal products, but it is not the only one. We also have national competent authorities for medicinal products, as medicinal products can follow different routes of authorization, as we will see. Next slide, please. It is located now in Amsterdam. It was in London until a few years ago, and it relocated to Amsterdam following the UK's withdrawal from the European Union. And for our purposes today, the agency's main responsibility is the evaluation of medicinal products in the EU, but also its role in pharmacovigilance. The next slide, please. Just a word on our Medicines Agency, the Italian Medicines Agency, AIFA, which is the national authority responsible for the regulation of medicinal products for human use. And it not only authorizes for replacing on the market medicinal products on the national territory, but it also has other roles that the EMA doesn't have. For example, setting fair pharmaceutical policies and also managing the value and cost and reimbursement policies of medicinal products. Next slide, please. Now, I give the floor to my Professor Minghetti again for the definition of medicinal products and medical device.
Thank you, Paolo. Next slide, please. Okay, when we think about our health and consequently health product that we then have on the market, we can see that we have different situations, and all these products need an health evaluation to avoid problems on the people that will take them. Of course, medicinal products are much more important because we can use medicinal products to prevent some pathologies, to cure, to treat pathologies, or to make diagnostic in vivo. Not very, similar to medical device, with medical product, we have medical device. As you can see in the slide, the claim are more or less the same. What is different among medicinal products and medical device are the mechanisms of action. In fact, medicinal products act following in pharmacological activities, a mechanism of action, while medical devices act physical mechanical mechanism. You can imagine everything that we can use to, for example, a stent for coronary or also a patch that you can use to cure something on the skin that is an harmful. Then we have food. We have normal food for nutritional purposes, but then we have food for special group. That means food that are used, people would have some pathologies and cannot use the normal food to every day. Then we have food supplement that are very, very similar in terms of dosage form to medicinal product, for example, vitamins or minerals. Then we have plant and herbal products, and another category is biosimilars that are all the products that can be used to destroy harmful organisms, for example, mosquitoes or other like that. The next one, please. Of course, we take care of medicinal products today, but I would like to show this slide so you can see that we cannot say that medicinal products are only for sick people and food supplements, for example, are only for healthy people. really is not the situation of the person that determine if the product is a medicinal product or not, but it's the claim. So if it is a product is used to cure or treat a disease, this is a medicinal product, or, as I told you before, a medical device. If you give to a sick people something to improve the physical condition, to afford in a better situation the pathology, this could be a food supplement, could be a cosmetics, could be something else. On the other side, we can have healthy people that can use medicinal products, for example, vaccines. Vaccines are to prevent disease, are used on a healthy person. So you can see that medicinal product can be used on a sick and a healthy person. And of course, we have to take care to the safety aspect, especially when we will give them to a healthy person. The next slide, please. Which is the difference? It's very different, the regulatory frameworks. Why? Because the important thing is to guarantee the safety of the product, but the risk of the use in an incorrect way, the product is different if you are taking a cosmetic or a medicinal product. So the regulatory framework is different, and it's much more complicated, much more demanding when we are trying to put on the market a medicinal product or a medical device. Why it is a little bit less demanding in case of food or herbal product or cosmetics. The next one, please. So the key factors for classification of health products. The first one is the intended purpose. The intended purpose is decided by the manufacturing, by the people that want to put the product on the market. So it's not a decision of the European, at the European level of the Commission or the agency. It is a decision of the producer. But if his decision is to put the product on the market with an intended purpose related to medicinal product, of course, everything has to be done in that sense. The other important thing is presentation, because presentation is fundamental for the patient to understand what he has to use, when and how. And another important key factor, as I told you before, is the mechanism of action. And then there are other factors, for example, the dose, the dosage, or other things like that. The next slide, please. The next one, you can go on. There are, I think, 3, 4. Okay. Here you can see some example of medical device. For example, contact lens. If you have problem in the eyes, of course, contact lens permit you to see better, but this is not a medicinal product, but device. You can go on. I think there are, Stefano, a lot of other. Okay, thank you. Then we have a food supplement. There are like vitamins, or I told you, for example, herbal products that can help you to live better. And for example, cosmetic that are used to clean or to maintain in good, maintain in a good situation the skin, for example, or the teeth. Okay, next one, please. So what can change between the categories? Of course, is the risk. The risk that we are willing to accept in change for a greater benefit. For example, we know that a medicinal product can have some side effect, and we accept a side effect because we have benefit, but the same side effects are not, for example, acceptable for a food. Of course, the food has to be completely safe. Otherwise, we cannot put on the market. So the risk is different in consideration of the aim. The next one, please. So we need, of course, a definition. The definition is the more important part of the law because you can understand to which kind of product that law can be used. And so we need a legal definition that includes the medicinal product, or the medicinal product, but nothing less and nothing more. And this is the situation in Europe. Thank you. The next one. This is the directive, because in case of drug, we have some directive. The last one is 2001-83 is number that is amended sometimes. Thank you. The next. And this is the current definition. As you can see, the definition is divided in two parts. And in the first part, there's any substance or combination of substances presented as having properties for treating or preventing. That means that if you put in the label some indication, some claim of the pathology, this has to be classified as a drug, even if it has no activity, not at all. Why it is defined as a drug? Because you can avoid that the lay people can use a product in the idea that will be cure the pathology, but it will not work. So a correct drug, the drug that are put on the market in Europe, of course, has to respond to the first part presented as, but also to the second one, that is, has to have the property of restoring, correcting, or modify physiological function, and that means curing or treating a pathology. The next one. So the definition is divided in two. The one is what we call definition by presentation, and the second by function. The next one, please. By presentation is based on an extrinsic formal criterion. That is, for example, the labeling, the advertising, everything that is related to the product in terms of what we are telling about the product. The second one, by function, that means what there is inside the product. So what is the real activity of the product? The next one. The first one by presentation, the next one. Okay, and this is by function. Okay, thanks, you can go on. The European legislation, we said that in case of that, when the product can be classified in two different categories, for example, cosmetic and medical device, or medicinal product and medical device, in every case, the rule of medicinal product will be the more important. So if you have some doubt on that, you have to apply the rules of medicinal product. The next one, please. And if you are not able to decide if the product is a medicinal product or not, so if you have some doubt on the classification, of course, the agency can help you in evaluate if it has to be considered a medicinal product or not. But if you decide to go on the market, of course, at the end, we have the Court of Justice of the European Union that can be involved in the evaluation of the single specific product. And in this website, you can find some cases to understand if a product, and it could be a product that in India is not considered a drug, and in Europe has to be considered a drug, or vice versa. The next one, please. Okay, this is one of the main page of this website. The next one, please. And what is the role of the Court of Justice? Of course, it is interpreting the law by using the single case. So not using in general, but following a single case, a product that is in the market in one of the member states, and starting from there, he can try to interpret in the law also for other, of course, for other products. The next one, please. Okay, so when we have decided if your product is a medicinal product, in that case, then you need a manufacturing authorization. That means that, for example, we have some medicinal products that are produced in India for the European market, and that is possible, but that industry has to ask the manufacturing authorization. as Paolo told you before, the manufacturing authorization is given on local sites. That means from one member state. The next one, please. So the idea is that if you want to be sure that you have a good product with a good safety and efficacy, on a positive balance, risk benefit balance, of course you need a good quality. So quality is necessary to have safety and efficacy. And then we have also the problem of the economic sustainability, of course. The next one, please. Okay, to assure the public health, so we need the good production, a good distribution, and that is another problem. For example, in case of product that has to be maintained in the cold chain, like the vaccine, for example, distribution is very, very important for the stability and so the safety of the product. And then a little bit the next, Paolo will tell you about the marketing authorization. The next one, please. In case of manufacturing authorization, as I told you, is the National Medicine Agency that take care of that. So if the industry is in Italy, is the Italian agency that take care of that. If the industry is outside Europe, you can ask to one of the member states. So if the industry is in India, for example, you can ask to one of the member states of the Europe to come to make an inspection in your industry and give you the manufacturing authorization. One is enough. That means that if the authorization is given by the Italian agency, that authorization is valid to all the European countries. So you don't need to go through one by one national medicine agency, but one is enough for all the European member states. And the manufacturing authorization is the same, is really identical in consideration of different types of drug. That means that it could be an originator or generic, a copy, or what we want. In any case, there are not differences in the evaluation in the manufacturing authorization. Some different there are in terms of marketing authorization, of course. The next one, please. One of the most important things to obtain the manufacturing authorization is to respect the good manufacturing practice. Good manufacturing practice are the minimum standard that a medicine manufacturer must meet in their production processes, and they are prepared at the European level, but as I told you, then they are evaluated by the inspection. The inspection, for example, in the slide you can see can be done in Italy by the Italian agency. The next one, please. What happened in US? Of course, the US is a little bit different from Europe, but in certain sense it's easier because it's a real federation. So you have only one agency, that is Food and Drug Administration, and they care for the marketing authorization and marketing production for all the members for all the US states. And in the last years, we have also a mutual recognition agreement among Europe and US. But this is not valid for India. So if you have a marketing authorization, for example, from Italy, and you want to go to the American market, US market, you need an inspection from the FDA, and they come in India, they evaluate the manufacturing, the site, the person, the apparatus, everything, and then they can give you the possibility to produce for the American market. The next one, please. Okay, so that is related to the production, and then Paolo will tell you about the marketing authorization.
Thank you. So now we have all set in place, and we are ready to think what we need to place on the market a medicinal product. Next slide, please. Here you see a history of European marketing authorization. Of course, being in Italy, we started with some Italian law, and then the different directive. The first important directive in 1965. Being a directive, it needed to be transposed into national legislation. So this took some time for it to be in force in Italy. And then you see we arrived to the directive of 83 of 2001, which is still in force, and the regulation 726 of 2004 on the centralized procedure. Next slide, please. So medicinal products can be authorized via four different procedures. I mean, the manufacturer, the marketing, the applicant, as we call them, the company that wants to place on the market a medicinal product and that is responsible for the placing on the market, that needs not necessarily to be the manufacturer, can apply through four different procedures. We will see when one it is used and when the other. The applicant has some choice, but not a full choice. So we have the centralized procedure, which is valid throughout the union, and it is assessed where the assessment is made by the EMA and the authorization by the European Commission. And then we have the procedures that are managed by the national competent authorities, which are the mutual recognition and the decentralized procedure. These two are used in cases where a company is not forced to use the centralized, does not need to use the centralized, and can choose to place on the market its product on one or more European countries. If the company decides that it is more than one European countries, it can use the decentralized procedure if they have no marketing authorization in any European member state, and the mutual recognition if they have the authorization in one member state and they want to extend it through to other member states. So of course, in this case, you can see there is no need to replicate the same information for different competent authorities. And then we have the national procedure where a company decides, again, if it is not, if there is no need to go through the centralized procedure, decides to place the medicinal products on the market only in one member state. Next slide, please. Let's keep to the centralized procedure and we see when it must be used. There are some cases where it is mandatory and some cases where it is optional and some cases where it cannot be used. So the regulation, as we have seen, that regulates the centralized procedure is the regulation 776 of 2004. Anyone can download the consolidated text, which is of any European Legal Act on the EURLEX website, the database of the European legislation, EU legislation. Next slide, please. So the centralized procedure, this is one of the articles of the regulation, is valid throughout the union. Now we call it the union. Next slide, please. So this one, that once the procedure comes to an authorization by the competent authority, it is valid throughout the European Union, so in every member state, even though there is some procedures that must be taken, that each member state must take care of to really have the medicinal products on the market in each member state, but it is valid, the authorization in each member state. This procedure is mandatory for some types of medicinal products. For example, medicinal products developed by means of biotechnological processes such as recombinant DNA technology, controlled expression of genes, and hybridoma and monoclonal antibody methods. So in this class, we have therapeutic proteins, including monoclonal antibodies. Next slide, please. It is also mandatory for advanced therapy medicinal products, and these are gene therapy medicinal products, somatic cell therapy medicinal products, and tissue engineered products. So these are medicinal products that are made of or contain genetic material, which is responsible for the pharmaceutical or action, or which is made of cells or tissues. And for this, the centralized procedure is mandatory. As you can see, for the most innovative medicinal products, the centralized procedure is mandatory. Next slide, please. It is also mandatory for new active substances, and when we say new, we mean that placed on the market, that were not on the market before the date of this regulation, so before 2004, for these diseases: acquired immune deficiency syndrome, cancer, neurodegenerative disorder, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, and other immune dysfunctions, and viral diseases. Next slide, please. It is also mandatory for medicinal products that are designated as orphan medicinal products, and which means medicinal products that are used, that are meant to treat pathologies that affect with a prevalence that is less than 5 on 10,000 people in the European Union. Next slide, please. The centralized procedure is optional when the medicinal product contains a new active substance. And so if there is a new active substance, so after 2004, not on the market before 2004, the applicant can choose to use the centralized procedure, or also in the case that the applicant can show that the medicinal product constitutes a significant therapeutic, scientific, or technical innovation, and that the use of the centralized procedure is in the interest of patients at the community level. Next slide, please. Once the marketing authorization is issued, it is valid for 5 years, and then it may be renewed on the basis of a re-evaluation by the agency of the risk-benefit balance, and we will see how this evaluation, what this evaluation is later. Once renewed, the marketing authorization is valid for an unlimited period, unless the Commission decides otherwise on justified grounds relating to pharmacovigilance. So 5 years the first time, and then unlimited after the first renewal. Next slide, please. And this is valid for all procedures. Once a medicinal product has been authorized following a centralized procedure, the European Medicines Agency publishes a European Public Assessment Report on its website, the EPAR, which is a very useful document where you can find much information on the quality, some part, but mainly on the non-clinical aspects and the clinical aspects of a medicinal product. The product is also enters also the community register of medicinal products that is freely that anyone can freely consult on the Commission website. Next slide, please. So here are just the links to find the EPAR on the EMA websites. Under medicine, you can search for specific medicines, or you have a mask for searching for categories like all the medicinal products that have a certain type of authorization, all the withdrawn, all the still authorized, and so on. Next slide, please. Here, for example, is when you enter, these are all medicinal products, in this case, authorized by the European Union in alphabetical order. And then, as you can see, there are these boxes to check on the left. There are many, much more than that, of course. Next slide, please. So we have seen the procedure to apply for marketing authorization. Now we look at what kind of information the company must submit to the competent authority to obtain the authorization. And the company submits a dossier to the competent authority that is made based on a template, a standardized template, which is the common technical document. It is common because it has been adopted by not only the European member states, but also in other jurisdictions, many other jurisdictions. Next slide, please. This is just a very schematic look at the drug discovery and drug development process, so that we can see how the different parts of the dossier and the common technical document in a way are based on this, logically based on this procedure. So we come from the lead discovery, target discovery, lead discovery, and the starting of the manufacturing, and then the preclinical studies and the clinical studies. Next slide, please. The CTD structure is logically the same. We have an added part that is module 1 that contains administrative information. This is very important because administrative information is not only the name of the company and the address of the company, but also it contains a copy of the labeling of the package leaflet on the summary of product characteristics. Then we have module 2 that contains summaries, and summaries are important because are the first impact with the competent authority, and we mean summaries of the next 3 modules. Module 3 that contains information about quality, so chemical information, pharmaceutical information, biological information, so the results of chemical analysis and biological assays on the active substance and the finished medicinal product. Then we have the module 4 on that contains non-clinical study reports, so it is mainly focused on safety, and module 5, which contains the clinical study report, so it is mainly focused on efficacy. The next slide, please. Apart from the fact that we have different procedures, when we write the dossier and the CTD, we can have different amount of data. The amount and the nature of the data that we put into our CTD is different, can be different, depending on what we want to do. If we have a new active substance, we are forced to use a full CTD. All the modules must be full. Module 1, Module 2, Module 3, Module 4, and Module 5. But in some other cases, for example, when we are making a copy of a medicinal product, some of this data can be omitted. In this case, we can have a partial or a simplified CTD, but I let my colleague explain it to a greater length. Next slide, please.
Paolo, this is the last part that I will discuss with you and are related to intellectual property rights. Because when you have a new molecules, a new product that can become a drug, of course, you want to have some property rights. The next one, slide, please. Really, we have 4 different pillars of the intellectual property right, and we will discuss the patents because it's more or less the only one that we can use in terms of medicinal product, but only to work on trademarks and before to go to the patents. The next slide, please. The next. Okay, what is trademark? Trademark is the possibility to give a name to the product. The name is not the name of the active principle, but it can be a distinguished name related to the specific active principle of that specific industry. And this is, of course, one of the case. And so we have one name of the active principle, and then we have one name of the final product, and then we can have also logo, sound, smell. It's not our case. In our case, we have word normally and logo of the industry. So you can, the patient can recognize the different producer of the same active principle. The next one, please. This is an example to show you how what I was telling you, that is, then we have an international non-proprietary name, that is the name of the molecule of the substance, and what we call INN, international non-proprietary name. And then we have the trademark. The trademark is a proprietary name of the active principle in that composition of that industry. And of course, if you have a very strong trademark, then you can have probably a higher market or avoid the possibility that the doctor can modify the prescription, or the pharmacist can modify and make substitution of the drug. The next one, please. Okay, I will not tell you nothing about copyright because it's the protection of the authorship is not applicable to the drugs. The next one, and also the trade secret is very difficult to use in the medicinal product. You can use in other type of products, for example, Coca-Cola or other product like that, where you don't need to tell to the authority the exact composition of the product. In that case, you can use secret in the production. But in the case of medicinal product, this is really impossible because you have to tell to the authority everything related to the production of your product. So the trade secret is very, very limited in case of drug. The next one, please. What we use is, okay, the next one, please. Okay, what we use is the patents. And this is very, very important because you can protect your process in case of production, your composition, your active ingredient, or also your device. So if you have a new product, you can protect them from the use for other people. The next one, please. So what you need to know related to patents, of course, the regulation of patents is different in India, in Europe, in US, but the principle more or less are the same everywhere. What type of invention are patentable? Now I will tell you something about that. And what are the legal rights that you can have? The next one, please. Okay, what is patentability? The next one, please. Patentable are the invention, so not the discovery. That means that if you discover something that was in nature, for example, flower or an animal, you can patent them only because you are the first one that discovered them. You can patent an invention. That means that you do something that was not in the nature before, and so it is new. Is something new that you did. And another thing that you need to have to have a patent is that to produce that new component, you need to have an inventive step. So it's not so easy to arrive to that product. And another thing that is important is that your invention has to be industrially applicable. So you can produce many products of that. So what you cannot have a patent for is discovery, theories, mathematical model, business method, or other things like that are not patentable, at least in Europe. The next one, please. Okay, so when we think about patent, we don't need to have a very, very, very important invention to have the Nobel Prize. But you need to have something that improve the technology at the moment, that improve the safety of the person, that improve the treatment of the pathology, or so on. And in this case, it could be a new substance, but it can be also, for example, the combination of two different substances that are on the market, but you understand that if you put together these two products, for example, you can have a really important improvement in the therapy, or for example. Or if you know that there is an active principle on the market for one indication, and you find that it can be useful for another one indication, also this thing can be patentable. The next one, please. What is not patentable? For example, method for treatment, or method to make surgery, or method to make a diagnostic, or plant or animal varieties that cannot be patentable. So the problem can be in the biotechnological process, because of course you start from microbe or cells that cannot be patented. But what you can patent is the process that permit to you to have a new active principle from the biological process. The next one, please. Okay, to have a patent, you need some requirement. Your invention needed to have some requirement. That is utility, it must be useful. That means that you cannot patent a substance only because you have a new substance, but you can patent if that substance can be useful to treat a pathology. So you have to demonstrate the utility in something, that is, in our case, the utility to treat or to prevent a pathology. Another requirement is novelty. It means that it must be new. There's not to be literature on that, or also thesis or everything around the world on that product. So you have to be the first one in the world, around the world, that have the idea to prepare that kind of drug, for example. Non-obviousness, that means that it's not so easy to obtain that product. So there is something of some idea behind that one. And you have to describe the product. You have to fully describe the product in the way that someone else can produce the same product. That is important because the patent is what we call a win-win opportunities. That means that the people that invented the product win because he can have the monopoly, can sell for 20 years that product, only he can sell, and so he has no hypothesis of other people that will go on the market with the same product. But on the other side, also the society win in the sense that you have to describe the invention, so other researcher can go further, can start from your invention and go further. So with the fully disclosure of the invention, it is easier to improve the research and to go faster in obtaining new medicinal products. The next one, please. The novelty means that there is no part of the state of the art. State of the art means that there has to be nothing around the world in terms of publication, in terms of, I told you, thesis, discussion in Congress, or so on. So before, if you have an idea, if you have a new substance or something new, you have to protect your idea with a patent before going to discuss with other people. The next one. Okay, so if you have a patent, what is your legal rights? It's okay, thank you, Stefano. The next one is fine. What are the legal rights for you? You have an exclusive right. That means that only you can produce, can sell that for 20 years. These legal rights are all around the world? No, that's depend of your decision. So you can ask to have the patent for all this around the world, all the state of the world, or only some state. What is the problem? That you have to pay for every state. So if you ask to have the patent for much more states, of course, every year you have to pay much more money. So you have to decide where you want to protect them, in Europe, in US, in East, or where you want. But you have to remember and to take in mind that if you select a lot of countries, then you have to pay a lot of money every year, because you have to pay the tax every year. So if someone will produce, a competitor will produce the product that is under the protection, of course, it will infringe the patent. And so you can go, of course, to the court and ask for, to avoid that he will go on and sell that product, but also you can have money back from that. Thanks. The next one, please. How is the structure of the patent document? Is a little bit complex. I will not go through this kind of structure, but I want only to tell you that what is very important is the description, of course. In the description, you have to write down the prior art. So what there is until now, why your product is better than what you have, which is the problem to be solved. In our case, it's easy. It could be to treat a pathology. Then you have the technical description of the invention, and then you have the claim. The claim is what you want to protect. Okay? The type of claim can be for physical entity, that is product, active principle, apparatus, or something like that, or process, a method to obtain something, a method to produce something. Okay. The next one. That we have a problem. The problem is that the patent will last for 20 years, but we cannot put on the market the product immediately after that we have the patent. So we have 20 years, but of these 20 years, more or less 8 or 10 are spent to obtain the marketing authorization. So at the end, if you have an invention on drug, you can use only 8-10 years of the 20. And this is a problem for the inventor of drug. So we have in Europe, but we have more or less the same things also in the US. We have a supplementary protection certificate that permit to prolong the 20 years with other 5 years if you can demonstrate that you spend this year to have the data for evaluate the quality, efficacy, and safety. So you can, if you spend 10 years in doing all this kind of research, and so you have only 10 years, you can add other 5. And so you spend only 5 years. The next one, please. And we have in Europe other type of data exclusivity or marketing protection. That means that, for example, you can avoid to have the generic on the market, but the problem is to have the generic that will take out your market. You can have the generic not after the 20 years plus 5 plus other period of marketing protection, but you can have also 1 year more if you, for example, in that period will go on and study the product and you obtain a new therapeutic indication. So we can use together the regulation of patent and then the regulation of data exclusivity and market protection, so to obtain the possibility to prolong the period on the market that you have the monopoly of your drug. The next one. Okay. All the things are important because only when everything is finished, that means patent is finished, but also data protection and market exclusivity is finished, only in that case, the authority can put on the market copies of your product. That means generics or biosimilar. Now I will give the floor to Umberto that will explain to you what you have to do to have that product like that.
Okay, good evening to all. Yeah, exactly. When all the protection expired, the possibility that some copy arrive on the market is a reality. The idea, the basic idea, back to, I'm sorry, Paolo. The basic idea behind the copy is the fact that national healthcare system should be maintain the economic sustainability with respect to the availability of medicine, the possibility to have on the market of medicine. And therefore, after the patent, after the SPC, after the data protection expired, The idea is to put on the market copies that can compete in terms of economic aspect with respect to the originator, and they make a decrease in the price or the reimbursement price for healthcare systems. But however, to put on the market a copy, we have to prove, we have to demonstrate that the therapeutic value of the copy result more or less the same with respect to the originator one. Next slide, please. And this is quite difficult, or maybe have different kind of criticalities, moving from the so-called small molecules that are the classical API, the classical active ingredient that are based on chemical synthesis, but is not maybe with respect on biological drugs, copy on biological drugs, and more as well critical is for non-biological complex drug. But in this presentation, we decided to focus our attention on the first two classes. Next slide, please. And no, the previous one, sorry. Okay, and I would like to start from the definition that is reported in the directive, the 83 directive of Europe about a generic medicinal product, in order to allow you and to stress you the need to watch on the 4 pillars that are put into this definition. To be a generic, a product should show the same quantitative composition with respect to the originator. They have to show the same pharmaceutical form. Okay, the definition accepted that different mediator release oral dosage form could be considered the same one. I mean, a capsule could be the same of a tablet, but at the end of the day, a generic should show the same pharmaceutical form with respect to a reference product. And that the two products should be compared in terms of bioavailability study in order to demonstrate that the bioequivalence of the generic product with respect to the originator one. Next slide, please. But what is the reference medicinal product? Okay, the reference medicinal product is an authorized medicinal product that was authorized in EU. It's not important that it should be authorized by centralized procedure, decentralized procedure, national procedure. It's not important, but should have all the protection, industrial protection, commercial protection expired. Only in this situation, they can be used as originator, as a reference medicinal product for put on the market as a copy, a generic medicinal product. Next slide. I thought that these two different definitions could be useful in order to give you more idea about the third and fourth pillar of the definition, but bioavailability is the classical definition that was reported in all type of pharmacology text, or if you would like to study in a book or something like that, that is the classical definition of bioavailability. For bioequivalence, if you look about the definition, it means that the two formulation should show a similar extent or rate to ensure that their effect are essentially the same. We need go back. Thanks very much. We need that the two components should be the two products should be pharmaceutical equivalent or alternative. That means that show the same quantity composition, have the same pharmaceutical dosage form. But why is so important when we discuss about the similarity in terms of the extent that show that the effects are the same? Next slide, please. Since actually bioequivalence that is should be performed, of course, on human volunteers, but could be used as a surrogate of the therapeutic equivalence. Carry out a bioequivalence study is cheaper with respect to carry out a classical clinical trial in which we show the equivalence of the effect, pharmacological effect of the two products based on clinical outcomes. Bioequivalence based on bioavailability follow actually the profile of the drug concentration inside the plasma of the volunteers and compare the profile in the two products, and the two products are bioequivalent only if the plasmatic concentration of the drug resulted superimposable, result essentially similar. Since for all systemic drug, the plasmatic concentration is generally related to the therapeutic effect, the clinical effect, so bioequivalent can be used as therapeutic surrogate. But is not in all the situation, it is assumption. Next slide, please. Since there are some, next slide, sorry. Okay, sorry. Since there are some drugs that are developed for acts locally or regionally, for which it's not possible to quantify the plasmatic concentration, or is not relevant, there is not a relationship between the plasmatic concentration and the drug concentration at the therapeutic target. Therefore, the bioequivalence cannot be assessed, cannot be performed, and in order to put on the market copies, next slide please, there are different kind of approach, there are different kind of possible alternative in order to fasten the marketing of such copies. And I show in this slide some example of guideline in order to support different type of differences, different protocol that can be applied for not for specific type of dosage form. Next slide, please. Okay, but when we discuss about the generic, as told Dr. Rocco before, we can take advantages of have a huge data set of information already available for the regulatory authorities, or already publicly available, due to the fact that we have on the market different kind of originator or reference product. And therefore, it's not sustainable, it's not feasible that a regulatory authority ask the same CTSD with respect to the originator one. EMI define, based on Article 10 of the directive, a specific procedure for generic product that is called generic medicinal product pathway, regulatory pathway. Next slide. That allowed, next slide, please. That allowed to reduce the amount of information that can be put in the CTD. Module 1, 2, and 3 that are related to administer information, summary, and then quality information should be full, as well as first in human product. Module 4, not. All the preclinical information are still available on the market, or are available for regulatory authority, and therefore is not needed additional information in Module 4. And Module 5 can be waived. All the clinical trial can be waived by adding bioequivalence studies. So the information reported, data reported in Module 4, Module 5 resulted significantly reduced with respect to the previous one. Next slide. However, when we move from copies of small molecule to biological drug, actually the critical aspect that should be evaluated during the manufacturing, with the pharmaceutical development, and during the regulatory assessment change a little bit, since, next slide please, since biological products actually are more complex, complexer with respect of the previous one. Small difference in raw materials, small difference in the manufacturing processes can impact strongly the pathway, the quality, the efficacy, and the safety pathway of the copy with respect to with respect of the originator one. And therefore, the classical regulatory pathway to put on the market a copy of biological drug cannot follow the generics one, since it's not possible to use only bioequivalence as surrogate to the therapeutic equivalence, since actually the bioequivalence cannot follow, is not so sensitive in order to check how such small differences can impact in the quality, efficacy, safety profile of the copy with respect to the originator one. Next slide, please. Therefore, EMI started to thought an alternative process in order to put on the market a copy of biological and biotechnological products, and call such approach like biosimilar approach, since it's based on not equivalence but similarity between the copy with respect to the originator. And such similarity was assessed, asking the marketing authorization holder and the applicant to perform the so-called comparability study. It means that a data set of information that are required, that in addition to equivalence, to bioequivalence studies, in order to demonstrate that the two products result similar in terms of nature. And for nature, it means that they have to show the superimposable similar quality, efficacy, and safety profile. Next slide, please. It means that when we look at CTD of a biosimilar, it's not the same of generic product, since actually for looking for module 3, we see that we have a full module 3, but you see in the slide the yellow label on the top of the module 3. That are all the comparability exercises that are asked for that specific biosimilar. For module 4, module 5 as well are required a mix of information that maybe are required for other copies, but are integrated with such comparability exercise based on the efficacy and the safety, in order to assess the efficacy and the safety similarity of the two products. Next slide, please. Actually, it's not easy to give you a broad idea of which kind of tests are required, since different biotechnological products have different criticism to be dealt with, and as well as integrated in the guideline, the ACH guideline of preclinical and clinical evaluation, you can see that conventional approach may be not appropriate to assess biopharmaceuticals. But they give you also underline the need to perform a comparison, that in order to show that a copy with respect to the originator should be comparable in terms of the traction and from a pharmaceutical point of view. This guideline that is not strictly focused in European regulatory environment, since ACH is a more international approach, more or less supported the idea, the approach proposed by EMI, in order to perform and put on the market copy on biotechnological products. Next slide, please. Okay. Until now, we discussed about which are the information that should be assessed, that should be performed, that should be submitted to a regulatory authority when we would like to put on the market a copy. But looking the problem, we see another side of the problem. I told before that a copy was put on the market since we have enough data in order to waive a lot of replicate study, in order to put on the market something that is more economic sustainable with respect to the originator one. The idea is to have a competition between the originator and the generic or the biosimilar. But in order to have a competition, of course, we need to put on the film some rules, to evaluate the rules, for which such product can be interchangeable, can be substituted in the national healthcare system. In other words, we need that the healthcare system can be used the copy with respect to the originator can switch from one to another one based only to the economic gain or based on economic sustainability evaluation made by them. Next slide, please. But this is not true in all the cases, since when we discuss about a generic by definition is automatic can be automatic substitute with respect to the originator one, since it's essentially the same, and can be, of course, interchangeable. The two terminology seems quite similar, can be used in maybe as synonymous, but are not the same. As you can see in this slide, interchangeability is the possibility to exchange one medicine to another one. Is a more theoretical aspect, more related scientific concept. Automatic substitution is not an action, is a practical action for which when you go in a pharmacy, the pharmacy can switch one, they can give you a copy with respect to the originator without asking to the physician. This change a little bit, since okay, the pharmacy have a skill in order to evaluate that without any problem, but the efficacy and the safety profile should be in all the case evaluated by the physician. So for a generic product that are essentially the same, are equivalent in terms of safety and efficacy profile, is not needed that the consumer, the patient, have to ask the consultant physician all the time in order to decide if they can take a generic with respect to an originator. It's not the same situation for a biosimilar product, for which biosimilar products by definition are not the same product, are not equivalent with respect to the originator. It's similar. And for that, there is a lot of discussion inside Europe about if that is can consider interchangeable or not, if can be considered substitution, the automatic substitution of generic, the biosimilar or not. Next slide, please. At the moment, EMI don't provide any guidance about the interchangeability of the biosimilar. It's not up to EMI define this aspect. It's something that have to be defined at a national level, and therefore national competent authorities have to decide if a biosimilar can be interchangeable or not, as well as it should be considered automatic substitution or not. Next slide, please. This is the position of our national regulatory authorities. EMI considered biosimilar interchangeable. Therefore, ideally, a physician can decide to use a copy or the originator without any particular issue. EMI suggests to start to use biosimilar for naive patient or to continue the therapy for chronic patient. Maybe if a patient have already taken the originator or have already taken the biosimilar, he should continue the therapy with that kind of product. Switching between one product to another one during the therapy is not sustained by our authorities. This is about interchangeability, about automatic substitution in Italy at the moment, and if I remember well, in all Europe, no regulatory authority allowed automatic substitution of biosimilar. Next slide, please. And this aspect was connected, next slide also, thanks. And this aspect was connected also to the heterogeneity situation in which our union can work based on price or reimbursement policy. It's not a problem only to evaluate interchangeability of the product, But the approach decided by EMI is also connected to the fact that at the moment, all the countries, the member states of the European Union, are allowed to decide their own price reimbursement and the policies and how they want to build up their national healthcare system, how they want to build up their healthcare system to their citizens. In this slide and the later one, you can see how heterogeneous is the situation in Europe when we are discussing about, for example, price policy. On the left part of the slide, you can see that not all the European member states have a regulation to rule how the price should be defined. In some cases, they rule all the price of medicine that are marketed in their at the national level. In other cases, only reimbursement policy are defined in terms of the price, prescription only, and so on. As well as how they have to define if a medicine can be reimbursement or not by the national healthcare system. The eligibility scheme changes from one country to another country. In some cases, more only for Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. You can see we have a disease-specific scheme for defining the eligibility of the medicine. In most of the other countries, we have product-specific, defined specific for specific medicine. Next slide, please. And as well, next slide, sorry. Okay, thanks so much. And as well as how they have to define how we can calculate the final price of our medicine. Most of the member states have external price reference system. Not all have internal reference system for copies in order to allow the economic competition that I told you before. And of course, if you can see a lot of yellow-blue in the map, all the different countries have their rule how they can define internal reference pricing and external reference pricing. So it's not easy to move from one country to another country and understand how the pricing policy can rule in that country, put in the field in that country, in that member state. Next slide, please. And coming back to the problem of the generic substitution, I told you before that in most of the cases, a generic should be automatically substituted in Europe. However, you can see from the left map, that is not true in all the countries. For example, Austria, Bulgaria as well don't allow the generic substitution, even if generics is by definition equivalent to the originator one. And as well, in order to looking about the right part, you can see that even if they're allowed the generic substitution, the co-payment policy for outpatient medicine change a lot, as well of the price policy, reimbursement policy, and so on. Next slide, please. Only to give you some broad idea on how Italy works, in this last few slides, I would like to show you which is the procedure in order to define the price and the reimbursement class in Italy. So we need to have a product that have received the marketing authorization from a national or EMI, a national authority or EMI. When they get the marketing authorization, they can submit a dossier to the AIFA for start the negotiation of the reimbursement class and reimbursement price. When the dossier was submitted to the authority, the negotiation procedure starts. Next slide, please. And the negotiation dossier arrived to the Scientific Technical Committee. That is a committee inside the AIFA that have to define the prescription status, for example, the therapeutic value, the innovativeness of the product. If the product is a generic, the product was put in the same reimbursement class of the originator, by definition, without additional discussion, and arrive directly to AIFA board of direction in order to evaluate and define the last decision, and then the agreement between the marketing authorization holder and AIFA was signed, and therefore the price reimbursement class can be put in the Italian official journal, so can be become official. But if it's not, if a product is fulfil man or is not a generic, is a copy that is not a generic, the dossier move from the scientific technical committee, arrive to the price reimbursement committee that should be negotiated with the marketing authorization holder, the two aspects, and the negotiation could be take less longer time based on the information that the price reimbursement committee required to the marketing authorization holder and so on. And at the end of the day, when the negotiation was ended, all the information was arrived to the board of the director that signed the agreement and put the information in the Italian official journal. Next slide, please. Only to give you the information, when we discuss about reimbursement class, in Italy, we can have three different possibilities. We have the class A, for which that include essential medicine for maybe the treatment of chronic disease. It was reimbursed by the national healthcare system and was distributed on the territories by community pharmacy. We have class H that include the medicine as well that are essential, but for which the prescription was limited to hospital, or the distribution was related to hospital or based on hospital prescription that was distributed also on community pharmacy, but have to be prescribed by a hospital professional, hospital physician. And then we have class C that include all medicine that have not reimbursed by the national healthcare system, and for the total price was paid by the patient. So we don't have any type of copayment. Class C actually can be divided in two different subclasses. Class CBs that contain all over-the-counter medicine, so I mean that don't require a prescription to be the patient don't need a prescription of physician. And class C and N, that is a particular class in which all the medicine that have a marketing authorization holder, have a marketing authorization, can be put after marketing authorization, meanwhile that the negotiation procedure was completed. So ideally can be administered to patients that need that kind of therapy, but can be paid by the health national authority, the national healthcare system. And with that, I would like, next slide, sorry. Okay, I would like to thank you, and I left the podium to Dr. Rocco in order to conclude the presentation with the pharmacovigilance section.
Thank you, Umberto. So we have arrived at the final part of the presentation. We give a brief look at the pharmacovigilance system in the European Union. Pharmacovigilance is the science and activities related to the detection, assessment, understanding, and prevention of adverse effects and other medicine-related problems. The EMA coordinates the EU pharmacovigilance system at the European level, but of course, the pharmacovigilance network has its branches in any member state. Next slide, please. Data on medicine safety in the context of pharmacovigilance can be derived from multiple sources. Reports of suspected adverse reactions that can be spontaneous and non-spontaneous, that can come from healthcare professionals, but also from patients, They can come from clinical trials, or from scientific literature, and from reports on pharmaceutical industries. Next slide, please. This is the Italian pharmacovigilance system. It is complex, so we don't focus on it in detail. As you can see from the report on the left, we have different roles that are responsible for pharmacovigilance in case of a hospital structure, and the VVG Pharmaco database, which in Italy. But as you can see, the Italian pharmacovigilance network is integrated into the European level pharmacovigilance network through authorization, as you can see on the right in green, and also integrated into a global pharmacovigilance network through the World Health Organization, as you can see in the lower right corner. Next slide, please. This is at the moment this is the current the main regulations and directives containing the legislation on pharmacovigilance. As you see, it seems quite complex. All the field has been changed considerably, starting from 2010, when you see Directive 84 of 2010 and Regulation 1235 of 2010. And then we have some Commission implementing regulation of 2012 and 2013. And it changed the flow of information, but this also changed the definition, and most importantly, the definition of adverse reaction. Next slide, please. Now, an adverse reaction, now from 2010, of course, is defined as a response to a medicinal product which is noxious and unintended. And this is a very broad definition because it also contains things that were not considered adverse reactions before and that are related to abuse or misuse or off-label use or other type of errors. And then we have also serious adverse reaction if they results in death or they are life-threatening or require hospitalization, and unexpected adverse reaction, the severity or the outcome of which is not consistent with the summary of product characteristics. Next slide, please. Then the regulation gives us some other, the legislation of pharmacovigilance gives us some other definitions, the risk management system that companies may be can have an obligation to set up, and the definition of pharmacovigilance system. Next slide, please. The legislation of pharmacovigilance in the European Union provides obligations for the marketing authorization holder, but also for the competent authorities and also for the health profession. The marketing authorization holders shall record all suspected adverse reactions in the EU or in third countries which are brought to their attention by patients or healthcare professionals, or that occur in the context of post-authorization studies, and we will see what post-authorization studies are. But also member states, and so the competent authorities in each member state have some obligation, and that to record all suspected adverse reactions that occur in their territory and which are brought to their attention from healthcare professionals again and patients. Next slide, please. And here we have some other provisions, the fact that marketing authorization holder must operate a pharmacovigilance system and evaluate the information from the reports. And next slide, please. Of particular interest maybe to us is that as part of the pharmacovigilance system, the marketing authorization holder shall have at its disposal a qualified person responsible for pharmacovigilance. And then maintain and make available on request a pharmacovigilance system master file, but we don't go into the details here. The qualified person for pharmacovigilance must reside and operates in the European Union and is the person responsible for the establishment and maintenance of the pharmacovigilance system. Next slide, please. As we said before, there are the EMA may impose to a marketing authorization holder to conduct a post-authorization study that can be of two types: post-authorization safety studies, if there are concerns about the risks of an authorized medicinal product, and post-authorization efficacy studies, if there are concerns about the efficacy of medicinal products. So these are undertaken after the marketing authorization, so after the clinical trials have closed. Next slide, please. Again, then there is, this is for all medicinal products, the periodic safety update report that any marketing authorization holder must submit to the EMA, and it contains an updated, a periodically updated evaluation of the risk benefit balance of the medicinal product, and also data relating to the value of sales of the medicinal product. Next slide, please. So the pharmacovigilance system is quite complex, and you can see how it integrates with the product life cycle. We have the authorizations website at the European level, the risk management system, and all these other post-authorization activities. So very complex and very in the focus of medicinal product marketing and post-marketing activity. And next slide, please. We all like to thank you for your kind attention, and of course we are open for questions.
Thank you very much for finishing the interesting lecture. Thank you, all three of you. So before we end the session for the day, I would like to invite Celia and Elda with the question and answer session. So please, if you could take up the questions asked by today's participants.
Thank you very much, Meenakshi, for the introduction, and thank you to our three speakers, Umberto, Paola, and Paolo, for an extensive and very comprehensive lecture today. So I think that is why we have many questions of very different natures. So I will try to club them so we don't, so we are a bit more time efficient. So the first one is related with the COVID pandemic. So we have two questions. One is to do with the vaccine. So how was quality, safety, and efficacy of COVID vaccine ensured? Was it done through national medical agencies in the EU member states or through EMA?
Okay, shall I go on? So for vaccines, all the COVID-19 vaccines have been authorized to the EMA, even though it is not necessary that all vaccines go to the EMA. It depends on the nature of vaccine, but given the nature of these vaccines, they've all been authorized through the EMA, and so quality as any other medicinal product. The EMA has some tools to ease the placing on the market of medicinal products when there is an emergency, and these have been used in this case. One is the conditional authorization, where the marketing authorization holder can place on the market a medicinal product if there is a high benefit, so an emergency as in the case, and an unmet medical need, and so that the risk-benefit balance is favorable, okay, so high benefit, but with a lower number of clinical data. And this kind of authorization must be renewed every year. And also the EMA used the so-called rolling review, which is a tool used in the assessment where the agency doesn't wait for all the studies to be concluded before authorization, but they evaluate, they assess the data as they can become available. So when the company has some non-clinical data, the EMA evaluates them. Then some clinical data and then EMA. And this allowed to shorten the period for placing on the market the COVID vaccines from the 10, 12 years typical for medicinal product to 1 year.
Thank you. I think that is why we felt that the process was like fast tracked. It was shortened, as you're mentioning. Another question that is really on the Indian interest. So after the COVID-19 pandemic, will the EU consider removing barriers that delay the entry of generics to the market? This could be a huge commercial interest for India.
If no, the generics.
Which kind of barrier?
Generics.
No, I mean, which kind of barrier protection,
So,
or you mean?
I guess for the generics produced in India to be approved to be sold in the European market.
Okay. If you mean that, of course, behind the vaccine, there are many patents protection. Okay. Behind every one of these vaccine, COVID vaccine, there are probably more than 100 patents. Not only one, more than 100. So one hypothesis can be to take out the patent. They are discussing on that in Europe. But I really don't think it could be enough to permit to produce the vaccine everywhere, because even if you take out the patent right, you need the know-how for the production. You need how to product. You need all the process. You need to know everything about it. So probably, I don't think that the removing of the barrier in terms of patent or right can be enough to permit to have all the vaccine everywhere. But probably we have to make some, I would say, join something from Indian industrial production and the American one that have the patent to permit to have some idea so that know-how can be transmitted to the Indian one.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning also the know-how. So the next question that comes with a kind of a political charge, is it coherent to have a public healthcare system leaving the pharma sector in the hands of the private sector?
This is very different member state from member state, okay? For in Italy. And it's different if you think about the production of drug, the marketing authorization of drug, or if you think about the health professionals and the hospital and everything. In Italy, for example, but I tell you, it can be different. We have a public production of drug, that is the military industry that make production of drug that are not available in Italy. And all the other production are made from in private industry, of course. And then as far as the hospital, for example, is still different. We have some private hospital, other that are public hospital, but all are part of the National Health Service. So it's not relevant if you are private or hospital or private or public, but all the hospitals are in the National Health Service.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pair with this question with another one that we have that also touches on conflict interest, I'd say. So it's to do with the last part of the session today. Is it possible that some doctors get a sum of money from pharmaceuticals for them to prescribe their products? Does this happen?
It's, of course, it's not permitted. It's happened sometimes, of course, but if someone understands that was the situation, there was penalty for the medical doctor or from the industry. So the industry will be taken out from the national service. So it's very, very difficult for them. And of course, we have also penalty for the medical doctor. It was 10 or 20 years ago, was a little bit much more frequent than now.
Okay, thank you. And now we have a question regarding the agencies. You have mentioned several times the Italian medicine agencies. So our national medicine agencies, do they have a problematic relation with the European agency?
No. In general, you have to think that in many cases, some of the experts from national agency cooperates with the European Medicines Agency. So we cannot say that there is a problem.
That they are.
Since actually the national authority, our system is still in this situation, since Europe is moving into an harmonization of all the processes. I'll give you only an example. For discussing about a shortage emergency, we move from a situation in which national healthcare system and national authorities, they decided to put on the field a different kind of strategy. Then Europe started to harmonize the process and allow the EMI to coordinate all national system. It's a teamwork in all the state, but for a lot of field, you need the time in order to put on the field the procedure, the tools, in order to allow all the people, all the agency to work together. That is the situation.
So there's an alignment. So we have two more questions. One is to do with the last part of Paola's presentation regarding patents. It's a very curious question. So are new designs, so for example, a medicine packaging, are they also patentable in the EU?
Yes, probably yes. I don't know if someone do, because probably it's not so important to have different patent proofs, but I suppose you can also do that. What they normally do, the industry normally do, is protection of the trademark, as I told you. And the trademark, you mean the logo, the color, the graphic, and so it's much more easier to protect with the trademark. The difference is that if you make the patent, you have 20 years and then that disappears. If you have the trademark, you can go on for all the life long if you pay every year. So trademark never finish.
Okay. And the last question that is to do with the last part of the presentation, are both interchangeability and automatic substitution practiced in EU member states?
Actually, you mean that if the same product follow the same rule for all the member states? Actually not. As you see in the section about how there are the automatic substitution policy, for example, OSTA don't allow the substitution of generics, for example. But for all the situation or aspect related to the price reimbursement class, the same product may be follow different kind of status in the different member states, as well for interchangeability and automatic substitution as well. It's based on how the member state define its policy. And at the moment, we don't have European Union guidance on that, and is given all to the national point of view, the national decision to build up the healthcare system.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's it for the, yes, sorry. If you wanted to add anything. If not, that is all with the questions of the audience, both from YouTube and from the Zoom meeting. Thank you very much. I would now give the floor to Dr. Meenakshi for the vote of thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to each one of you, all three of you. In fact, you touched upon a very vast area, starting from, you know, the drugs, the medicinal products, the devices, and how are their manufacturing as well as marketing being controlled in EU. And along with that, you also made us understand the interchangeability and bioavailability, bioeffectiveness, so that the terms which we often use interchangeably. So you made it clear look very, very clear to all of us, as we use the term trademark and copyrights participants for today's lecture. And so a very big thank you from all of us here in India to three of you. And we hope to have more similar sessions from your side. Thank you once again very much. Thank you.
Thank you to
Okay,
you.
with that, we end the meeting. Stefano, would you like to add to that?
No.
Yes, we can hear you.
It's okay. Yes, I think that I will just actually say thank you, and for the actually students, we're gonna actually meet on the day after tomorrow at 6:30. So not 6 but 6:30. Grazie mille and good night.
Bye bye. See you in India.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.